Alright, so let's go and explore a few more of these items that we have here in what we call the context bar. Right, this is the menu bar. This is the bar which carries the menus, and these are all the different menus we have up here. And then below that we have a context sensitive bar. This bar changes based on the context, based on which tool you have selected here from the toolbar. This is the floating toolbar here. And so when you are on the paint tool, the natural brushes, right-clicking that will give you lots of presets, different brushes, and but just clicking it also will give you a number of options here. So let's see what we have. If we start with, let's take one of the simple brushes, like the large simple brush, and then we pick a blue color and draw something blue here. Alright, so that kind of size, this brush size, you can control with the size value here. Alright, so this is something that allows you to very quickly switch to a smaller or finer brush, and then use different colors and use a different size. That's one of the heavily used presets or parameters. Now there are a few others. There's the opacity. Let me go back to the full size and work on the opacity. So if I bring the opacity down, it's not doing a whole lot here, and I have no idea. Oh, there it is. Yeah, it is actually doing something. It is reducing the opacity, but it's also currently stamping down this single image very tight. So you can, yeah, here it is. Here it is now, somewhat transparent. But the thing is that you have also the step distance here that works on that. So if you have a bigger step distance, you can see it much more translucent, and that's because the dabs are not close together, not as close together as before. So you can actually find the opacity a little bit easier to use that way. Now if you bring them up too far, if the steps are too far, and maybe to highlight that, to show that you can have the opacity higher, you will actually see them. See right here, you can see every single dab as they are spaced pretty far away from each other, and so you can have them perhaps even totally disconnected. Let's grab a different color here, the pink or red, right? And you can see that they're totally disconnected. So these three parameters are some of the parameters that you also see in settings. This is the settings panel right there, and I would recommend tagging this one down here with the tag, pinning it down so that it doesn't go away when you select others like the shape or the papers and so on. Those will stay just temporarily. But essentially here I mentioned the size, the opacity, and the steps, and you'll see them here too: size, opacity, and steps. So these three parameters are of great value for many types of brushes that you want to use. You'd like to draw simple dots, small ones. You can also have the relative step or an absolute step. So the relative step will keep them a little bit closer relative to their size. So if you change the size of the brush, it will increase the distance of these dots, so they still don't overlap, right? So you can increase the size, and they'll still be spaced pretty much the same way. And there is a couple of, let's explore some of the other parameters here. You'll notice there are two groups. There is a group of parameters here, and then there's a group of parameters down below. Alright, so first of all, I'm going to reset everything here. I'm going to just take a preset, let's say the airbrush, the large airbrush. Alright, and let's grab a blue color. There you go. So what you see is that there is size, opacity, step, that's the distance from one dab to the next. And then we have the speed scale. So with the speed scale, what you can do is you can have the size of this change based on how quickly you move. If you go positive speed scale, it gets bigger if you move, no, excuse me, it gets smaller as you move faster. So that's a little bit like what you would experience with a drippy pen. And if you paint over, if you draw over or sketch over paper, if you go too fast, it doesn't have much time. Like here along this fast line, it doesn't have much time to infiltrate and put the ink into the paper. Whereas if you go slowly, you can see that it gets a wider area covered with that ink. So that's a nice feature to use when you want to simulate something like drippy pens or ballpoint markers. And in fact, that's what you do when you select here and you go to, I don't know, pen, ballpoint pen or drippy pen. That's exactly what you see here, is that there is a speed scale. Now it might go the other way. It might go very small. It might use a negative value, and so let's explore that a little bit. There's a size initially here pretty small, but so if you go faster, it might go big, and if you go slowly, it might go fine. So there's a different approach to that one, and so you can play with these and adjust them so that you get different appearances, different effects there. This one also is using a different color. You see, when I use yellow as a color, it doesn't necessarily stay yellow as a paint over other colors. It's actually a multiply mode. It's multiplying to the existing color. So you have a mode color here, or a color mode, and here same thing. It's right now in multiply mode. The default would actually replace it and paint over it. There's a couple of other modes. There's subtractive, which makes it darker, eventually down to black. There is additive, which makes it brighter and easily saturates to white. Unless you lack, the RGB values are being added to the colors that are already in the canvas. But if you have 0 on any one of those RGB values, then that particular channel would not be increasing. There's a variety of modes to experiment with here and try. The screen mode. And you'll find some of these used in throughout the presets. So some of these built-in brushes will actually take advantage of the effects that you get from that. Couldn't point one out in particular right now, but keep an eye on that. Occasionally you'll see it. There you go. Here's one where it says paint smear, and what that does is it first paints a dab at the current primary color, and then it smears with that. And so that's one example where you see the mode change based on using a different predefined brush. Let's grab the large pencil. Now it's back to multiply mode. Let's grab, and by the way, that one also has paper texture enabled. So when you go and draw like this, you see some sort of a pattern show through that. That's the paper texture that you can see here, and you can reduce the relief so it doesn't show that strong, and plus also it shows more if you go over it a few more times, so that kind of accentuates the paper texture underneath it. You can change the type of paper texture, all sorts of presets. There's a few new ones here, by the way. If you've used an earlier version of Dogwaffle, here in version 8 we've added a few more presets of paper textures, and of course you can add your own. You can use the brush, you can load a bitmap file or a JPEG image, and you can also use your own brush image as a paper texture to go through the painting with another brush now. So very, very versatile way to create additional little intricate details throughout your brush strokes under the brush. Let's move on here. There's a speed scale I mentioned, the random position, very powerful tool here. Let's go back to the preset airbrush and have a look at the random position. So with random position, what it does is it veers off your ideal path, right? I mean, you basically draw, if you don't have random positioning, you draw a perfect line going along wherever your mouse goes, right? And then if you say you want some random position, you can go like this. And instead, now I'm not going to draw it again along the path. I'm going to use the existing path. Dogwaffle remembers the most recent path. And if I change color, and I don't go into the canvas, I can still go and do something like Shift A to repaint along that most recent path. This brush stroke can be used again and again. So I can go and change color. I can even change brush to a totally different style. Let's use one of those smear modes. What was it? Totally oil. And do a Shift A on that, and it smears it along that path. Right, and I can do that several times. So Shift A again and again, and perhaps I'll use a different blur mechanism. There is effects, there it is, or something like a modeling clay or smear 100. That's a bigger one. Shift A, that will smear it along that path again and again. So the same path can be used multiple times, and the random position allows you to have it also go along that. So Shift A, let me make sure I get focused on that. There you go. So now it's shifting along and randomly positioning offset there along too. So as I'm painting with that, for instance, if I'm putting let's get a couple of red dabs here. Nope, that's right now it's in smear mode, so it's not going to let me do that. Let me go back to default mode. There. So you see the random position, and that allows you to very quickly create a very large area in some particular color. But not only the position can be randomized, but also the size and the angle, the rotation. Now these take a little bit more time. If you are on a slow system, you will want to be aware of whether you're using a custom brush or a standard internal brush. When you see this right up here, there's a couple of different brushes. Some of them respond to the positioning, some of them don't, and some of them respond to the size and angle, and some of them don't. So the anti-aliased pen does not do the random position, but most of the other brushes do, and also the custom brushes. That doesn't take much time to do a random position offset. But when you are using custom brushes, which is what I'm doing now, because right now here you see the preview, and that's this button here, the preview. That's a hint that it's a custom brush that I'm carrying in the mouse, and that's essentially the random size and the random angle is not going to be applied to that unless you allow it. So you got to go to the if you see that the custom brush is selected rather than this one, in which case the size would be taken automatically, right? You could go and say random size and make it a very big random size. So you see some of these, and let's increase the distance a little bit so you can see them better. There you go. So now you see that a number of these and that wasn't exactly what I wanted. Let's erase it to white. There you go. So you see that these dots are not all the same size, right? You can see some of them really small and some of them really big. That's because of the random size. So if I set the random size to the maximum value, you'll see some really small, some really tiny dots, and you'll see some big ones. Right, so what about doing that with the brushes? Like, for instance, if I take one of those favorite ones, beach balls, right? These are custom brushed because it's basically an image that's in the brush and it's moving through. Well, it's not going to let me change the size, random position, random size, unless I have something enabled, which is in the custom brush tabs. And that is this checkbox here. You see it enabled with allow custom brush transforms. If you didn't do that, it wouldn't do the scaling. Each ball would stay the same size and the same orientation. You wouldn't see it change angle. It wouldn't turn around. It would still do the random position, as you can see here. It's not going perfectly along my line. If I change the step distance to a small one, you can tell there's a lot of jittery behavior here, and that's the random position. Alright, so random position it can do even if you don't allow it to do custom brush transform, because positioning it doesn't take much time. But we don't want to overload your system if you have a slow old computer and try to rotate or scale this image on the fly every single time that you stamp it down, that you drag and paint with it. So you have to tell us that yes, you actually have a fast enough system to do that. You do that by checking this. Now, some of the brush presets have that automatically enabled. Some of them don't. So for instance, the hot dog will not do that. And that means, for instance, that highlight, that hot spot that you see, the white area, the glossy specular highlight, it will not rotate, or it will not change size. It will not do random size changes unless you enable it, right? Go to the custom brush tab here and then allow it to change size, right? Or if you don't want to change size but you want to randomly change the angle, alright, let's keep the size current at whatever it is. Now here you see some rotation too. The size remains the same, right? But the angle at which this thing appears is different. If I click and put a couple of stamps down here, you can see that the highlight is always at a different randomly selected orientation. So that adds a lot of additional features and effects to the brush itself. Look at what it looked like, what it does now with randomly changing the angle. And if I don't do that, this is what it looks like. So different. And just a few parameters like these will make some phenomenal new types of brushes for you. You know, you can always start from one and then randomly add position, randomly add some scale or speed scale perhaps to change it. And look at that. Yet another way. And then perhaps add some modes like smearing or screen. Let's go to smear mode. There it is. And yet again some other effects. So this is one of the areas where Dogwaffle is really fun to play with and just experiment with these numbers. And whenever you have something that you really like, don't just forget about it, but do something like saving it. You'll want to go and save this as a preset. You can go to Browse Media and save media. Collect all the parameters that you currently have into a single entity and make that a new name. And I don't know what to call it. Is don't know the name. So anyway, we have a don't know the name brush, and it's there somewhere in alphabetic order, probably down there. Usually goes hiding, and it might be even in a different folder. But you can create your own folders. You can see all sorts of different presets here or there already here, and then of course you can take this into another level of art, which is filters. For instance, the new 3D filters for transforms. Let's take a look at that 3D designer, and perhaps let's go into a perspective look and shade that, and also change the color to whatever the image color is, right? So we now have a 3D landscape based on that original image. Perhaps upside down, a little plateau. I like the valley here. And make it a bit more perspective-y thing. Maybe rotate it to a different angle. Yeah, and so, get lost in another planet. There's actually also a spherize tool. There's a tool to stylize this with the lighting effects. And that one has been enhanced quite a bit with the latest, with this version of Dogwaffle 2D Pro 8. You can add a little bit of multiply to that, add a little bit of specular highlight, or a lot. Put it a little bit more distant, like this, and look at that. So I'm going to keep this and now spherize that, transform, or crystallize. That's another cool one. Look at that. Yeah, shade, a new feature there too. Let's go spherize it though. I always like to end in some planet. Spherize. Match it there a little bit. Give it a little bit of blue. What else do we need for a decent planet here? A little bit more textures, some terrains. And lots of things to experiment with here. Point lights. Add a little bit of specular to that. Look at that. Make it a little bit smaller. That's a new feature also in version 8. You can change the size. The radius of the sphere. There you go. And now I'm going to just move that to the side, or maybe catch it as a custom brush. So I'm going to go and use the magic wand to select the outside, and then I'm going to invert my selection, invert alpha, and I can catch that as a custom brush. So now I have, if I preview it, I can see that it's my custom brush, and I can place a couple of these in different places. It still has the random rotation and size and other transforms happening on it, and I might want to store that. Let's go store and manage it, so I can also have it in different smaller sizes or different other criteria. I might change the hue, give it a distinct tint of some sort. I might want to change the step distance again, so they're a little bit closer together. Reduce the random position. I mean, we've seen that all now, right? Random position off, so they're all a little bit contiguous. And then also random size. Nope, no random size. Perhaps no random position or angle. None of that either. So we can actually go and turn the allow transform off here to make it a little bit faster. But we may want to allow it to rotate, so we can rotate. We can change the angle based on our paint, and even go smooth that a little bit. There we go. And now just increase the step a little bit here, perhaps 9 or 10. There we go. And what else did we learn earlier? Something about mirror. Let's go and mirror that. Actually, let's make it a little bit smaller first. Like this. And now let's go and add some mirror capabilities. So I'm going to go kaleidoscope 8. That's a bit intense, but it works. Another way we could use that is instead of the mirror or kaleidoscope, let's do vertical mirror and horizontal mirror at the same time. And there you go. Let's do full size, 100%. Take this one out of the way. There we go. So that's that for this quick little intro on some of the parameters. We'll explore the remaining parameters in another tutorial. Those are the parameters you see down here in the second group. The random hue, saturation value, the bleed, and the dry out. And we'll have a lot of fun with that as well.